How you doing, everyone? And welcome to Dreadnought Gundam and More on PS4. And this is the Dreadnought Azure Night Update review for Dreadnought Gundam and More. And before I continue, I just want to say happy holidays, and that includes a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a great Kwanzaa, and any other holidays that may be celebrated around this time. Sometimes we say happy holidays, and some people kind of think that dilutes each individual holiday, particularly Christmas, so I just thought I'd try to cover all the bases. So this is kind of a cool update. It covers some complaints that some of the community has had, especially concerning bugs and discoloration on some of the purchasable items. It's good news for Havoc mode for PC. We're probably going to gloss over that a little bit, but there is also a new ship out. It looks pretty cool, and there are some very interesting changes, two of which I think are very good. There wasn't one change that I wanted, and we'll get into that later, but you know what? I shouldn't be spoiled and just be happy for all the great things that are in this patch. First of all, we have to get into PC finally getting Havoc mode, and on PC they're going to be having that in a beta. It explains exactly what Havoc mode is, but we're no strangers to that. We know it's an endless wave with some rewards, and you can do it with your buddies, or you can do it alone. That's a little tougher, and it gets quite difficult, especially in the later stages. And of course, Havoc is where we find the automated Jupiter Arms assault carrier. Remember that the Dead Fleet Horde is an automated fleet that was sent into the asteroid belt between Mars, which is the nation of Troja, and the colonies of Saturn. And in this belt we have Sinley Bay, and they have a network left over by the transhumans, and us outlaws, pirates, and mercenaries of Sinley Bay use this warp beacon network to almost jump around and use somewhat ninja covert skills to get around the solar system, and particularly to get around the asteroid belt. So in Havoc mode they send waves of these ships because Troja, which is Mars, they really don't like Sinley Bay, and they try to shut down these warp beacons, and we're partly successful, but that's the story with Havoc. And it is now on PC, though it's in beta and it has some problems. Of course, ours is running just fine. So let's get into bug fixes. Ship vanity now appears correctly in game. Now, for the most part, this is true. The Bastion and many other patterns and paint jobs on the ships are correctly being rendered in-game, not just in the hangar, and when they're in the hangar they're working properly. However, I did test a couple of things, and the Raven Guard, which is like a raven icon that's on the bow of your ship if you have the Chernobog skin for your Zamays out there, that is not working properly still. And the Nereid bridge is not working properly. I did test those out, but everything else that I could find was working properly, and I think that's just great. It's been a long time coming, and you know, we try to be a very polite community, and we tolerate a lot of stuff because the game doesn't have the popularity of some of the other games out there, and therefore doesn't have the manpower, woman power, resources to fix all these problems. But if you're paying real money, if you're paying gold for a vanity item, it really should work. So I'm glad that they made that their top priority for this patch, and I'm very happy. They still have a little ways to go. I mean, the Nereid is a hero ship. You're not going to be using the Nereid in legendary mode. Basically, you're buying it for the skin because a lot of these hero ships don't have very good builds. You're buying it for the skin, and if the skin doesn't work, that's kind of a waste of money. So we'll see if they continue to correct some of these issues with vanity items. Siege mode. Wow, have we been spending a lot of time on siege mode. First it was useless and no one used it, then it was super overpowered, then it got a small nerf, then it got a small buff as far as its proximity when it explodes, and it went through a lot of tweaking. And I like this because we never want modules for ships to be useless. And I'm not going to get into it too much, but let's take a look at tactical cruisers, how the artillery pod is so strong that everyone uses it and almost every other module is not used. I mean, if you look at destroyers, most other ships, at least half the modules have a use in a lot of builds, and several areas of a ship have some very good choices. So for artillery cruisers, we don't want to just give them defensive stuff. We want them to have some punch. Siege mode delivers the punch, especially when they upgraded it. So does rapid fire mode. Rapid fire mode seemed to even out and is working as intended. It's really good on specific artillery cruisers. I've seen players completely slice and dice ships using Oberon artillery cruisers with rapid fire mode. Siege mode is a go-to for all artillery cruisers, but for a while it was invisible. The shots were invisible, so sometimes you just get owned by it. That's gone, and they reduced the proximity, then they increased it, but right now they're reducing the proximity explosion to 50 meters. They're keeping everything else the same, and the reason why is because Corvettes were getting caught up in this thing, and if you led a Corvette enough, especially with Oberon, and you fired siege mode, they would literally run into the explosions that siege mode makes, and that's just no good. You can't be using it like a flak cannon, okay? That's what flak is for. We actually have flak guns. So they decided to reduce it to 50 meters, and this makes it a little harder to hit Corvettes, but it still makes it so you don't have to be right on the money. If your shot passes within a couple feet of another ship's antenna, it's not going to be a miss, it's still going to be a hit, and I think that is really important. Now, this is some exciting news. Storm missiles. Now, storm missiles, it used to be that there's an old bug. If you're a PC player, you don't remember the old days of PS4 when, unfortunately, Scramble Pulse disabled your control of your energy wheel. So if you did not have your shields up before a Scramble Pulse, you couldn't do anything about it. So it was almost like a drain and a scramble together. They got rid of that bug, and ever since then, Vindictas have gone from using the Scramble Pulse with this storm missiles down to ramming. But they still felt with the Drain Pulse in storm missiles, it was just too strong. So quite a few months ago, there was a big nerf, and storm missiles got their damage and number of missiles reduced. So roughly half as many missiles were fired. Each of those missiles did more damage, but the total damage was less than what it used to be. So this made it that repeating missiles did 27,000 at tier 5, did a lot of damage, and they can be used at 5,000 meters. They're a little slower. And then you have Tempest missiles, which are actually, believe it or not, they're a little quicker than the repeating missiles. It's just the repeating missiles swarm, so it gives you that imminent doom effect of it bearing down on you. If you actually try to outrun missiles, Tempest missiles are harder to outrun, and their total payload, which never happens, you never hit with everything, is right around 21,000. The thing about it is you can fire it every half minute, and if you're running on average a 10 to 15 minute match, you're loosing 20 plus volleys of Tempest missiles, and it's a lot of DPS, it's a lot of rate of fire. It turned out that that's my favorite go-to missile. I've tried all of the modules for the Athos, and with misses, and even the Scylla torpedo, which was my favorite for a very long time. It has a very low cooldown, very long range. They don't hit you, they don't usually hit the side of a mountain, and if they do, they're back in a half a minute. So Tempest missiles are very good, so that left Storm missiles with absolutely nothing. Scroat loved to kill people with Storm missiles simply because they were the worst missile. So Scroat would run up on you in his Athos without using his guns and Storm missile you after a drain pulse and then flak you to death just to prove he could, and because he has a soft spot for these missiles. But now they're getting a much needed buff. Now the thing about Storm missiles is they're on you. They lift off of your ship for about 1 full second, 1 Mississippi, and then all of a sudden they are all over you. You have very little time to react, which is why they got the nerf in the first place. But you had to close into 2,000 meters to use them, and if you're going to close into 2,000 meters to use them, you might as well use the flashpoint torpedoes, because you might as well go in a little bit farther, 600 more meters, and have something that normal anti-missile defenses can't counter, do a lot of damage, and also don't alert the enemy to your presence. So flashpoint torpedoes, if you're using Storm missiles, you might as well use flashpoints. Well, now they're upping the range of Storm missiles to 3,000, which pairs well with the normal torpedo salvo, and you don't have to really get in. I mean, 3,000 meters isn't hard to get into, especially if you're darting in and out with, let's say, a non-ramming Oberon destroyer or a very fast Jupiter Arms destroyer, or you're in a Jupiter Arms destroyer where you're being hunted and you're expecting people to get the drop on you, or there's other Brutuses or Vindictas in the area, Corvettes, things like that. Well, it's still, and that's something I didn't mention before, is the Storm missiles have a fairly high cooldown, just like the repeating missiles. So now it's 3,000 meters, and I think that's really, really good. That's a really good spot because they're really on you. They're very fast firing, but at 3,000 meters, you have, as the victim, as the target, some amount of time to react to them, but they can still be used at point blank range if someone gets the drop on you and they think that they're a very vicious Corvette or a Brutus trying to ram. You can dodge them and then in their wake leave a whole bunch of missiles and kill them. So the number of missiles fired at tier 4 is increased to 18, so now there's a chance of them overwhelming missile defenses again. And the range is increased, as I mentioned before, from 2 kilometers to 3 kilometers. At tier 3, it's getting roughly a 1,000 total damage boost. And to tell you the truth, at tier 3, you have to be very good to be using Storm missiles at tier 3. I know I did use them a couple times, but Tempests were the way to go. At tier 4, which we're getting into legendary mode, we have a slight increase of 1,000 damage total, and that's pretty good. So now they're doing as much damage as Tempest missiles, but are far faster, far more rapid, and there's now more missiles, so they're harder to shoot down. So now they're competitive with Tempest missiles. They're roughly doing the same amount of damage, but Tempests are usually fired far away, and they're fired in this long line of missiles, and they're not nearly as fast, but they have a very, 10, 15, 20 second lower cooldown. Now you can sneak up on people, deliver the damage, and in tier 5 we're getting a 2,000 point increase for a total of 26,400 damage, rivaling the missile repeaters, which are 27,000, and definitely surpassing the 21,000 for the tier 5 Tempest missiles. So this is big news. Maybe the Storm missile will make a comeback, but it doesn't seem to be as super nerfed as it was before, because no one was using it. It's very rare to see it. In fact, I forget who, there was a replay I watched that was sent to me many months ago about someone doing a personal challenge to kill people with Storm missiles. I believe it was Wakshini, did it, but I might be mistaken on that. If I am, I'm sorry. And now we have this kind of short but not super short range missile that can be used defensively or offensively, as opposed to a ram or a flashpoint torpedo. And it now has a nice little area where you have your mid-range missile repeaters, and they do a lot of damage, but they're slow. You see them coming. And then you have your long-range but very rapid-fire DPS Tempest missiles, and now you have Storm missiles that are filling in that gap at 3 kilometers. And then if you want to get even closer than 3 kilometers, well, you know what to do. This is the other big one, and I am running a little longer than I wanted to, but these are some really exciting events. Squad size reduction to 2 players. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Now, many of you may want to throw me out in a snowbank for saying that, but there was a big problem on both PS4 and PC where you have these 4-member teams. And I'm not even going to call anyone out or mention any names, but they're very tough to crack, especially if they're good players. If they're mediocre or new players, yeah, it was nice to have some cohesion and 3 buddies out there defending you, but some of these teams were very, very vicious, and some players wouldn't even play the game unless they were in a 4-person team. So now with these squads, they're reduced to 2. Which means that if there are well-known players out there and they're playing together, there's going to be a chance, let's say there's 4 players from a clan-like group or from a particular country that like to play together. If they're playing together and they can only have squads of 2, there's a good chance that they may be on the same team or they could be opposing each other. And if you have several of these squads of 2, then you're going to get a really interesting mix. And tactically, I think this is good too, because you now have kind of like a ship and a wingman, and now you have several elements. And this is actually how Navy and air battles are fought in modern history and previous history on Earth. Is typically you have wing leads, wingmen, you have squadron, supporting squadron, ship, and escort. So think of this more as like an escort or a small team. You can do a Dreadnought or a tactical, or you can do 2 corvettes or 2 destroyers. So or even a tactical and an artillery cruiser. So I think this makes it easier for those that are soloing or are new or random and just want to do pickup games. I think this is going to be better for the gameplay, because you won't get these obscene shutouts where you have a team deathmatch that's 100 versus 12 point score, or you're going to have those insane onslaughts that one team barely broke 100 only because they went after the command ship, and besides that they were getting totally slaughtered. So I think this is good news, and if you don't think it's good news, I highly recommend that you pressure the devs of Dreadnought to return custom match mode. And I think that will solve this problem, because if we want real clan play, you want an environment where the clans can kind of beat on each other. There's a huge argument in the Dread chat all the time about who's good, who's bad, who's a good team, who's a bad team, what works in team tactics, what doesn't work, and the only evidence is clans that rarely meet each other in battle beating on randos and solo players. So you can't tell me that that is a good indicator of how strong strategies are or a clan is. And I think the only way to do that is to return to custom matches where the clans can have truly organized gameplay. So now we're moving on to PS4 team elimination. For whatever reason, there is a problem when they did the server, not the server merge, but they basically tried to make PS4 the same as PC. There was some kind of problem where there wouldn't be enough bots populating, so it's really, really hard to get a team elimination match. Most people don't even try anymore, but now it's going to be a minimum 5 team elimination per team, so a 10-player total. For recruit, 8 of those can be bots. So if you have one other player, including yourself, in recruit popping team elimination, you're going to get a match 5v5. For veteran, if you have 4 human players, they will add 6 bots so we can get team elimination going. And in legendary, you'll need 6 players, 3 per team, and then they'll fill in 2 bots per team, 5v5 team elimination. So maybe we'll get some more team. I would love to post team elimination replays. I think it'd be very exciting. And many other games, including Battletech and several others, don't even have a respawn. When you die, you die. And I think that might change how people view the games or tactics being used during those kinds of matches. If only we could get Conquest in here too. So then we're going to end this with the Azure Knight market update. And with this, we're looking at the new hero ship, the Fenrir. It looks really cool. It doesn't mesh well with other Oberon destroyers, but it has a really cool looking bridge, and if you use the entire skin, it looks really, really awesome. Very, very cool. It doesn't mix well with other pieces, parts, but it's a new... Now we have 4 skin sets for the Oberon destroyers, and they're a popular ship, so I think that's a really good idea. We have the Azure Knight bundle. I actually just picked up the bundle because it's Christmas and I wanted to throw some money to Dreadnought. And it had a lot of stuff in there, even if I didn't plan on using it, and I came across the pattern, the Azure pattern, the Azure Knight or Azure Dawn pattern. It looks really cool. It adds a lot of these ornate white stripes to most of your ships. So I use that on a lot of my ships now. It looks really cool. I really like it. And you get a really cool paint job. It's a metallic blue with metallic red and metallic purple. And it's just really cool. I really like it. So look for the Fenrir's Knot pattern collection. Look for the Azure Knight bundle. I think it's 2,800 gold, or you can just pick up the Fenrir by itself and get a whole bunch of goodies there too. And of course, we have Winter Headwear collection if you want to wear a Santa hat when you're number 1, number 2, or number 3 at the end of the match. And we have previous holiday items from previous seasons that are back in the market. So that's going to close up the Azure Knight update notes. I will have a couple of videos because I have the next few days off. I'll have a couple surprises for you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful and safe holiday season. Well, that's it from me for now, and I'll see you soon in Sinley Bay.